welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and we are a minimalist family who is living big with less. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about my journey growing up with hoarders. So if you have experienced generational hoarding or you yourself maybe see some hoarding tendencies in your own life, I'm going to share a little bit about my journey and some things that have really helped me grow, and I hope they will help you too. Firstly, guys, I just want to say that this video is meant with the utmost love and kindness. If you have been around on my channel for any length of time, you would know that I am a huge advocate for just meeting people wherever they are at on their journey. And the spectrum of hoarding is so wide. Everyone's story is so different, and we're all going to have different experiences around it. So today I am just sharing my personal experience and the things that have helped me to learn and grow from going through that. And so if that is you, if it resonates with you, I really hope you enjoy this video. I'm just going to give you the abridged version of my story. So my grandparents, both of them, were chronic hoarders. They were compulsive hoarders, and the afterflow of those effects have affected my mum and also my aunts and uncles to varying degrees. And in my personal situation, we lived with my grandparents for a period of time, and I also went on to be my grandfather's carer for a period of time. So I had a lot of experience both living in their home, being a carer, and also just the flow-on effects that come from generational hoarding. So for my grandparents, they were the most lovely people you have ever met. They would give the shirt off their back. They were a huge part of their community through scouts and all different community avenues. And so they were just very busy, loving people, and they have left that legacy to their children and to us as their grandchildren. But one thing that I wanted to share with you today was some of the things that I learned from growing up with these hoarding tendencies and what I saw and how that helps me to be able to help people who are struggling with clutter come from a place of empathy. So I'm going to break it down for you and sort of go deep dive into those things that I learned. And again, everyone's story is completely different, but these are the things that I have seen not only in my grandparents and my parents in the flow-on effect, but also as I work with clients who struggle with either generational hoarding or compulsive hoarding, that these things seem to reoccur quite frequently. The first one is adaptive behaviors become normal. Once we have been doing something for a long period of time, that becomes normal to us. And if you are in a family that does adaptive behaviors, that's all you've ever known. I don't know if you remember the first time you went to somebody else's house and you realized that they didn't do everything like your family did, and it was this big aha moment. But that can be a really big thing for people who come out of a hoarding situation, is that there are things in their life that were adapters because of the hoarding that they thought were normal. So for example, in my situation, kitchen counters were a huge area. I don't ever remember seeing my grandparents' kitchen counters clear unless we were doing a big clear out. My mum tells me these stories of how my grandma used to prepare meals when she was a child by pulling out the drawer and putting a cutting board on it because every other surface was covered in clutter. And these things become normal, and so we don't even recognize that they are making our life more complicated, that we are inconvenienced on the daily because we've developed these adapting patterns. Another area where I really noticed it was in the bathroom. You know, there would just be so much stuff everywhere. There literally wouldn't be a place to put anything down because there were so many products around the bathroom. And so these little inhibiting factors over and over again, not only do they chew up your time because, you know, you're having to adapt all the time, but you also just don't even realize that it's happening because these are the things that are normal to you. So one thing that I like to suggest to my clients is just to be aware that these things are going to be really different from what you're used to, but they can be really positive too. And that as we step back and learn to enjoy things if they're easier and take notice if something is better because of clear space, that's going to help build on wins so that we can all, you know, appreciate that we're not having to use that adaptive behavior anymore. Another area where adaptive behaviors can be a subconscious thing is for my grandparents. We were always out and about, which is such a lovely thing. And I am a huge advocate of getting out into the world and taking my family on adventures. But I also now realize, looking back as an adult on my childhood, that the going out was probably to some degree an adaptive behavior because we didn't want to be at their home. So we would go out, there just was more space, we would have picnics, we would go to parks where the whole family could fit because we couldn't fit at my grandparents' place comfortably. So that is something that I recognize, and I know for them, you know, I do remember lots of family dinners around their dinner table, but I also remember having to clear all the stuff to one end, that we would often just sit on half the dinner table because there was so much clutter. And again, it seemed normal to us because we had adapted to that way, and that, you know, as I look back as an adult now, how I wish I had been able to give my grandparents freedom from that clutter so that they didn't have to use those adapters as much anymore. The second thing I have come to notice as an adult is that when people are in a hoarding situation, they cannot see the extent of it. I often give clients the analogy of, you know, sort of like a horse with blinders on, that we can only see what's in that field of vision, and that by having somebody else come in, particularly someone from even outside of the family, that gives an opportunity for us to see things as a whole picture. Now, hoarding is a very deep-rooted issue, and it often comes from a place of severe trauma, and so there's often a huge psychological component that will have to be dealt with before we even think about removing any of the clutter. But just keeping in mind that if you do have hoarding tendencies and you are to some degree aware of it, that maybe seeking out the opinion of someone that you know and trust to help to show you what the extent is, or to have a professional come in and work alongside you, can be a great tool. Something that became really apparent when I was caring for my grandfather, and then when my uncles and aunties went in later in his life to try and clear the house to make it a safe place for him, was that the extent of the hoard had really inhibited even just those simple maintenance things that need to be done in a home. So there were, you know, entire rooms that were dedicated just to stuff. And whenever you're living like that, things like mold or plumbing issues, or, you know, just doing general maintenance on a kitchen, which is getting a lot of use, those things can't be seen just because there is so much clutter there. So as you start to, you know, pare down and peel back some of these layers, if you are working through a hoarding journey, that it is very confronting to just come to terms not just with the stuff that you've got there, but also with the extent of what that stuff has been hiding. The third thing that has become very apparent to me and to a lot of the clients that I work with, particularly if you yourself are not a hoarder, but maybe you come from generational hoarding or have a few hoarding tendencies, is that we live in fear of becoming that. So it's a huge thing to acknowledge in ourselves. And I know particularly for my mom that, when you're the person outside of the hoarding illness looking in, that you can sometimes react out of a way of fear of not wanting that for yourself or for your family, and wanting to also see freedom for that person that is suffering from hoarding. So that is something to be really mindful of, and being empathetic, not just to others, but to ourselves, that if you have grown up in a hoarding environment, that realizing that drive to not become a hoarder may become overwhelming at certain points in your life, and that just acknowledging it and being kind to ourselves is really important part of the process. Tagging on from number 3 is number 4, and I call it the double whammy. And this is for you guys as well who have been on the outside of hoarding looking in. Not only do you have the fear of not wanting to become a hoarder, but you also have the learned patterns of being a part of a hoarder household. So often, I talk about mantras about living big with less, letting go of things that don't bring you joy, things that are on that peripheral from what is going to help you live your perfect life. That those things are mantras that I have brought into my life, and that there are opposite mantras for hoarding, so that we don't throw that away, I can use that, that's wasteful, we should keep it in case we need it. And so what you may find if you have come from generational hoarding is that you sort of have these two conflicting mindsets. You have that fear and that drive to not take on hoarding behaviors, but you also have that second component of, oh my goodness, I'm being wasteful, I shouldn't get rid of anything. And so just being mindful that is probably what's going on in your mind if you have trouble with these things. Now, you do not need anyone's permission to get rid of things, but sometimes with clients, I have found it helpful to simply say, I give you permission to make decisions about these things. So if this is helpful for you, take this as my heartfelt permission that you are valid of choosing what items you have in your life, and you have my full permission to get rid of items if you feel like you need to. If that sounds bonkers to you, just leave that away. But if you have come from a place where getting rid of things was taboo, this might be a balm to your soul. So please take that permission to get rid of whatever is not bringing you joy. Number 5 is, if you have grown up in either hoarding or dysfunctional behavior, is that when you come out of that as a grown-up, that you may not have the same skills as everybody else does, and that this is something that you may have to learn as an adult. And that's really good to remember, just to be kind to yourself, that some people have been practicing this for a lot longer than you. And so if you need time to work out what routines are going to work, or if it takes you a little bit longer, or you need a professional's help to put some routines in place to help organize some spaces, or to build up those skills to declutter, there is absolutely no shame in that. We are all gifted in different areas, and we all have different skills, and this is like nothing else. Whether it's going to get your tax done by a professional because you don't know how, if this is something that you've struggled with because you didn't grow up with good routines, just please seek out help in whatever way you need it. Because my mom was the first generation after coming out of compulsive hoarding, this was something that she really struggled with. Just not having any of those skills, no idea about cooking or cleaning, about how to declutter or organize a space to be really functional. And so, of course, it took her a lot longer, which then meant that, I grew up in a level of dysfunction while she worked it out. But I think one thing that we have to remember is that we as human beings are very resilient, and that, no matter where on your life you're learning these skills, whether it's that you learned it as a child and had a lot of practice, or whether you're gaining these skills as an adult, it's never too late to learn skills. It's never too late to come together as a family with those around us and put those things in place that are going to help us moving forward. Number 6, and this is a really big one. If you have come out of a hoarding situation and you have turned it around, you've got great systems in place, what you may now find is that you have the flip of that problem, and that is some triggers. So for my mum, it was empty boxes. If a box ever came into my grandparents' house, it probably never left and it got filled with stuff. So for her, getting rid of empty boxes is a real trigger for her. And so if there is any lying about, that can bring on anxiety. I know from other friends and clients, it can be things like paperwork, or for me, it's actually when we get back from a vacation or a holiday or a camping trip. Those items used to sit out for a long time when I was a child. And so for me, prioritizing those things, recognizing that they're a trigger, that it doesn't mean that I have any hoarding tendencies, and it just might bring on some emotion when you have those triggers, and just being aware that they're there. If you see this in yourself, some hoarding tendencies, seeing what triggers those feelings to hoard will also help you sort of catch them quickly and either process them, ride the wave of those feelings, and then make some healthy choices once you're finished. The last thing I've noticed is particularly around us on the outside and how we can best help those with compulsive hoarding or with hoarding tendencies, is often based in seeking outside help. And so whatever that looks like, as I mentioned before, the root of hoarding is often trauma, and some deep trauma that might need some psychological help. And so that is a great place to start. And also somebody else coming into the situation, if it's someone like me, a professional organizer or decluttering expert, who can come in that's not a part of your family, this part of the process is integral, because we don't have that same emotional connection to the things or the person that you do. And so when we come in as an external party, we can go through items without sort of any connotation that we're trying to take their items, and we can build up a trust and help them focus on their goals. And it's often a lot easier than if, it's the son or the daughter or a granddaughter coming in to do that same thing. I know in my family that we had gone in to clean up my grandparents' home with the best of intentions about making it a safe space for my grandfather, and that, in that process, his hoarding actually got worse and his mental health was really damaged by this process. And so, we all make mistakes, and we all have to work within whatever the parameters of what we have in front of us are. And there may come a time where people don't have the choice whether they get rid of items or not. But if it's available for them to get some mental health help, as well as feeling a part of that process, that is the key to long-term change, and also to having a better, healthier choices going into the future. So guys, I would absolutely love to hear from you down in the comments. This has been a hard video for me to make, to be honest. It's really raw, and I hope that my desire in making this video is never to make someone feel bad. In fact, I am all about breaking down the shame around clutter and not having those skills naturally because we are all so different, and that, you know, my desire is to meet people wherever they're at on their journey. So if you guys have had some experiences and you feel comfortable in sharing them below, I know the power of your stories helps not just me, but all the other members of our community feel less alone. It also helps, you know, just for our own mental health, to share with others who've had a similar experience, that can be a really healing process. So I can't wait to chat with you down in those comments. I'm sending you all of my love, and I will catch you guys in the next one.